And if you want to be able to, want to see what should happen, well, look at what's happening in France. There has been actually a general strike in several, how many in Greece? I think 5 or 6 general strikes in Greece this year. That was the beginning. So what did they say in the newspapers in England? They said, oh, the Greeks, lazy bastards, sit on their asses, sit on their bums eating dharma salata all day, paid for by the European Union. Then there was the Spanish. The Spanish organised a general strike, 29th of September. Are the Spanish loca, nutters, all going out, sangria, smash things up. That's because they're stupid, the Spanish. Then it was the Portuguese. They organised a general strike. Portuguese, after all, it's not even part of Europe, really, is it? They had a dictatorship till '74. And then it was the Italians. They went on a general strike. Another bunch of nutcases. They're always hot-blooded people. Then it's the French. Well, the French are always on bloody strike, aren't they? Everyone, you know, anyway, you look, drop a bloody hat and people are on strike in France. However, let me point you one little thing out. Do the Germans go on strike all that much?
No.
You ever heard of the Germans? But last week I saw on television. In fact, on YouTube. On YouTube, I saw this piece. It said in Stuttgart there were upper middle class people, and I saw the video. Upper middle class people standing in the park, being attacked with pepper spray and pieces of wood by Robocops. By Robocops, thousands of Robocops, singing the German national anthem. Singing the German national anthem. I thought that's a bit strange. Then I saw little kiddies, 15, 16, 14, being beaten by the police in Germany as well. Now, this is supposed to be the society where you forget about the past, of the fascist past, the dictatorship and so on. I remember going on a demonstration once in Germany, in West Berlin in the 80s. And as soon as the police came out on the street and started pushing people around, the old women went up to him and said, "I've seen this before, what are you doing? You're destroying our republic," you know. And so I think what you're seeing is a generalized crisis of European capitalism in which we have to have the beginning of an awakening of the commonality of interest between working people of all countries of Europe and for that matter of the world. But let's start with Europe, because here we have a single unified campaign by the capitalists of Europe and their governments to drive down the living standards of working people across the whole of the continent. And therefore it requires a unified response, not just general strikes here and there, but unified coordination across all the countries of Europe. Have you seen any reports in English of what the French themselves who are on strike are saying? Or have you only seen mediated reports written by journalists? You haven't seen the reports. So there's scope to coordinate, to combine, to find out, to discover, to exchange, to send, if it's students at the universities in London, send delegations to France. Workers in the workplaces in London, in the underground, in the buses. Yesterday the fire brigade were on strike. Send delegations to France to discuss with the workers there. Have French workers come over to England to discuss here. Send people to Spain to discuss with them and coordinate across the relevant sectors of the economy so that we're supposed to be in a single European Union, defending, having similar rights, similar conditions. Now it's true that if an employer wants to employ someone in Poland or from Poland, in England or in Poland, they can do so. They're free to do so. They're free to exploit across the national frontiers. And yet, the combination of working people across the national frontiers does not exist. Does not exist. And yet you've got the same crisis and the same attacks by the governments which represent the same interests, namely multinational, pan-European capitalist corporations. I got a letter from my landlady the other day. The estate agent, that is, not the actual landlady. You've got these in-between parasites all over the place in Britain. Estate agents, you know, these half of the bloody legal profession, the business, half of the business profession, half of the banking profession, half the media industry, parasitic, blood-sucking creatures living off the backs of the work of real work of working people. And regardless, nevertheless, And these are the people, of course, who are back in the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. Nevertheless, if you can combine the interests of working people and the action of working people across the European frontiers and bring them together to take coordinated action across all the European frontiers, then you're talking about a real creation of a European Union. I remember reading when I was in Berlin a few years ago, and I was reading about the resistance movement in Nazi Germany, in the underground. One of the resistance movements was led by a man by the name of Harro Schulz-Beuys. And they had a group, the the Schulz-Beuys opposition group. And the Schulz-Beuys opposition group published a newspaper, it was called European Union. And the idea they had at the time, under Nazi Germany, was when the Nazis and Hitler is overthrown, they will never again have war in Europe, because they will unify working people of Europe to maintain a genuine democratic control in the interest of the majority. Not a dictatorship or a so-called democracy run in the interests of private banks and big businesses, by the way, who financed Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in the 1930s before he came to power, and maintained that wealth after Hitler had gone, after Hitler had shot himself, after a handful of Nazis were put in prison at the end of the Second World War and a few were killed. The people who ran Nazi Germany economically, who had slave labourers from all over Eastern Europe and from France and the occupied territories, those same companies, the Deutsche Bank, Siemens, Krupp, Thyssen, the big corporations, big corporations which now dominate Europe, acquired a significant proportion of their capital under Nazi Germany. And so the idea that these businesses are democratic representatives of the European people is a lie and a myth. Come to that matter, if you want to know the origin of British capital, ask yourself this: where did the money for these bankers come from? What is its historical, archaeological origin?
Well, the Barclays, they get it from their slavery.
That's right. Originally, they get their money from investing in the slave trade. They made their original capital, their original sin, by investing in stealing black hides from Africa, transporting it to the Caribbean, importing sugar from there. They were the founders of world trade. Then they got more money. Once they had that money, they accumulated control over vast regions of the world. 70 years ago, Britain had the biggest empire, in other words, the biggest global concentration camp in human history. And they acquired vast resources from plunder from every corner of the world. Now we're told our neighbours are Muslim, must be a parasite receiving housing benefit that they shouldn't be getting. What do we nick from their countries? And what are the British capitalists sending out their armies and bombers to harm huge regions of the world? Even to this day, we have our troops in Afghanistan firing bombs down on innocent human beings. And yet we've got money to drop bombs on Iraq, money to drop bombs on Afghanistan. But apparently there's no money to look after people in Britain. And you get these pictures on television now. I saw on the internet yesterday, oh, there's a guy from Kenya here. What the hell is he doing in England? Don't forget about the Mau Mau. The British occupied Kenya, murdered the Kenyans, put them in concentration camps. When some desperate individual manages to arrive in England, stick him in a concentration camp in Oxford, behind barbed wire, then stuff him on a plane, or perhaps drive his head down until he dies on the plane, with other passengers on board. They don't even have special aeroplanes to take them abroad with. They now stick them on normal commercial flight. Sleazy Jet and Ryanair take them. And so the idea that this society is geared around the democratic interests and will of the majority is an absolute lie. Someone asked me the other day about local government, and I explained to him, he didn't realise this. I remember a friend of mine years ago who was very heavily involved in local government. He said to me, "Do you know who runs the council?" And I said, "Not really." And he says, "Do you know who doesn't run the council?" I said, well, not really. He goes, the councillors don't run the council. The councillors don't run the council. Which is true. Who runs it? Councillors are elected, they're part-time.
The state.
The officers of the council run the council. The officers of the council. Because they're in there for years. It's a job, it's a career. And in that career pathway, what are they doing? Trying to line their pockets. How do they line their pockets? The funding they receive is allocated by the council officers. They allocate funds to what? Let's say the housing budget. They allocate funds to a housing budget and they make deals with their buddies who set up private businesses in conjunction and planned by them. And they feed the resources to those private businesses. For example, in Southwark, a few years ago, the head of education, he knew that the education department was going to be privatised. So what did he do? He left the education department and set up a private consultancy. The private consultancy then made a deal to hand over the entire education in Southwark, one of the poorest boroughs, not only in Britain, but in the whole of Europe. Right next to one of the richest boroughs, the richest regions, geographical regions, the City of London, in the entire planet. In the entire planet. And yet, he makes a deal. Who does he hand the education of Southwark over to? To a road building company. To a road building company. Run by 3 people. And that supposedly is how our great democratic British society actually, that's really how it operates. Not the way they like to tell you. They make out now, oh, everybody's going to have a chance to participate in reorganising public finances. There's a big society. You're all going to be involved. What they mean is you're all going to be stuffed. You're all going to be stuffed and you're going to like it. And when you like it, they say, that was really big of you. You took that really well. That's the idea they've got. So what you will see, we are entering a period of profound transformation in class relations. Only 2 years ago I was standing here. People thought I was okay, they listen, but they think you're a nutcase. Now all the explanations I was given a couple of years ago in relation to the economic crisis and the attacks on working people are coming to reality. Now that's not because I want to claim that I know better than you. It's simply that we have to recognise where we're at. We're in a position where there is a class struggle being organised by the rulers against working people. And therefore it is the necessity of the day for working people in London, in each area of London, in each city of Britain and each city of Europe to come together and combine to defend our common interests and our common rights as working people to achieve a reasonable living standard and improvements in living standards that correspond to the improvements in education, in science, in knowledge, in technology, and in, of course, intercommunication of the modern world. Everybody knows that with each step and each hour and each day of this planet, human beings improve their technical and scientific ability to produce. So then why, when we reach a point of the most rapid advance in technology and science in human history, why precisely at that point, when we are advancing more rapidly than ever before, should the living standards of the majority be driven downwards? It is an absolute contradiction created by the nature of private ownership of the means of production, individual appropriation of the wealth. 350 people in the world, roughly, own more wealth than half of the planet. That's supposed to be the best way to organise. I'll tell you just 1 second. I just wanted to, this morning I did a little song for you, which I thought might be appropriate.